For those who still see themselves as very likely to be left behind somehow or left out, how would you encourage them to use SkillsFuture?
Many of the older workers, what they lack is not the ability to learn. What they lack is the confidence to learn. And they express the same fears. What if this thing becomes too difficult? So the best way to convince them is not by talking to them, but really by showing them and walk through with them. And once they do it, it's a lot easier. Even learning FaceTime, WhatsApp, Facebook, you try to talk to them about FaceTime, but it's very difficult. But you tell them, say, look, with FaceTime, we cannot talk to a person, see the face of your grandson, your granddaughter. Everything becomes a lot more appealing, you see. So I would say that really is our challenge. Help them see the benefits so that to overcome that fear, strengthen their confidence.
Well, I'm going to switch gears slightly now. Something I read somewhere, that apparently when you look at the Singapore workforce, a lot of us, yes, work for SMEs, a lot of people work for MNCs, but at the same time, very few Singaporeans can be found at the headquarters of MNCs. Harish, give us a reading of why you think that might be so.
Firstly, I don't agree with that observation because there are two types of operations that a multinational would have in a country like Singapore. You have local operations, which are really catering to local consumers and so on. Our philosophy has always been that we need to have local management and local people because they have better insights, better understanding of what's going on. You'll find a large number of our local jobs are all Singaporeans. Then it comes to regional and global jobs because one of the things that Singapore is trying to do is to attract companies to set up not just regional operations, but companies like ours have global operations here, global supply chain, global product development. Now for that, by definition, you need to make sure that you have the right kind of global talent working on it. We have a large number of Singaporeans who are also working in our regional jobs. Having said that, I think we have to recognize that multinationals want to give careers to their employees. The point that you were raising, it's not about giving jobs. In order to build a career and then work your way into bigger roles in regional and global operations, you cannot just keep working either in a regional operation or in a local operation in Singapore. You have to move out. And I would encourage Singaporean talent go and work in China, go and work in the UK, because ultimately these are top talent. They're as good as you would get anywhere. But in order to give them that career path, it's also important for Singaporeans to be able to be more mobile. And I think that will help in terms of giving them bigger careers, as indeed some of them already have. I'm proud to say that we had many Singaporeans who did that, including, by the way, some of our women managers who went to China and were very successful. So we need to do more of that. But I disagree that multinationals do not have local Singaporeans working in their operations.
The concern is if there are excessive number of foreign PMEs in local operations as well. That's one that I hear many Singaporean PMEs are concerned about. Right. The weak Singaporean coin, not just global operations, right, but local operations as well. So taking away jobs is actually Singaporean PMEs can feel.
You know, Patrick, the way I would look at it, it is in the enlightened self-interest of organizations to have the top local talents in their operations. The crop that comes out, the people that graduate from the universities in Singapore are as good as anywhere else. Why would you not want to? So I see a little bit of,
Which is why I link back to my earlier point on the mismatch. So we need to find those mismatches.
Absolutely.
So as company globalize their operation, they put in the efforts to localize the management know-how, the expertise and so on. What we have to do is to continue to move in a direction by speeding up the nurturing of our local talents. The challenge in terms of helping our local to have fair and equal access to those opportunities, and hopefully with SkillsFuture, let them have this unfair advantage of being able to pick up the skill expertise faster than elsewhere. I would say that under the SkillsFuture, the program known as a Leadership Development Initiatives, LDI, in my view is a very important one, and we hope that we'll work closely with the industry, with the agencies. And can we nurture more of what I call the local talents? Local talents which are globally competitive so that they can take on many of these global functions, whether it's Singapore or elsewhere.
And so far we've been talking about the changing job market, having to make mid-career switches. We've been talking only about workers, employees, right? So does that mean that those who are self-employed are less vulnerable to the trends that we're talking about, changing job market, having to make mid-career switches?
There's also another group of self-employed. They are like the freelancer. For example, tour guide, people who are on contract off service, for example. And I think that group is also a great concern to the labour movement because they don't have employers, so they're on their own. Reaching out to them individually obviously is going to be quite ineffective. What the NTUC has been doing is to reach out to them as a community. So once you reach out to the community, we can work with them to identify what are common challenges faced by them, including skill upgrading. Their jobs are also changing. So I would say that the SkillsFuture is likewise relevant and important for them.
NTUC actually set up a freelance and self-employed unit to look specifically at this group of individuals. They can be freelance professionals in various sectors, photographers, sporting coaches, etc., etc. So we're trying to look at areas which help them move up and be more professional in their job, how to even match them to job opportunities or contract opportunities.
So I had the good fortune to be talking to an MBA class, an MIT MBA class. And I asked how many of them wanted to join businesses, like the ones that I spent my entire career on. You'd be surprised there weren't as many who raised their hand on that. But if you ask them how many wanted to have their own businesses, startups, work for smaller firms, the kind of firms that we are talking about here, many more want to do that. And the question is, how do we create that enabling environment and that cultural mindset that tomorrow's employment is also about self-employment? And I think that's so important.
Well, it's been a wonderful discussion, very thought-provoking. Before we wrap up, let's hear the final thoughts from our panelists.
I think we have to embrace change. And change is not just companies' prerogative, but the individuals. So SkillsFuture is the way to go.
I think this is a three-part process. One is the government has come up with SkillsFuture. The second is from the employer standpoint. We have to encourage training and give space for our staff to train. And third is for the employee himself. He needs to take up the initiative to find the right courses.
Singapore does not have a hinterland or natural resources. So, in fact, the success of Singapore in the past 50 years is because of our people, manpower in that sense. So I hope as we move towards the next 50 years, and particularly, calling out to employers and businesses, please don't treat your employees as digits. Treat them as value assets, human capital to help you to grow and do better.
Well, I think SMEs certainly do take their human capital very seriously. A lot of them have really upgraded the way they practice HR. SkillsFuture would represent something which strengthens the individual skill set, and we certainly look forward to it fusing successfully hand in hand with the other support schemes so that as an ecosystem, we get the uplift.
Well, I think people, without a doubt, are the most important assets that any company or indeed a country has. And I would say that growing our people is as important, or perhaps the most important precondition for growing our companies and growing our country. For the programs that we are embracing, the SkillsFuture programs that the government is embracing and the companies are embracing, is absolutely the right way to go in terms of growing people, growing our businesses, and growing our country.
Minister, your final words.
I think if you look at the future, there are certain trends which is quite clear. The education profile of our younger generation is getting better. Aspiration is getting higher. Now, going overseas, working in other countries is not a bad thing because you acquire, like what Harish mentioned, skill expertise. But the idea is that if it's a one-way traffic, it will be a net loss to our very precious human resource. Right? So what we like to see is that they get nurtured outside Singapore, ensure that we can retain our local talents. For the various sectors, I believe that each one of us can find a way forward together. It's important that we all recognize that the next 5 years and beyond will be very different from the past 5, 10, 20 years. So change is unavoidable. So those that are not able to embrace change, they may turn out to be a victim of change. At the same time, the economic transformation that we are now going through is also a platform for our businesses. So if we can keep up the pace of the transformation of businesses and the transformation of the workers, the outcome can be a very positive one for all, where businesses can grow profitably, where the economy can grow in a sustainable manner, and most importantly, our Singaporean workers can take on better jobs, have more meaningful career, and sustain their wage growth. The whole purpose of the SkillsFuture is to ensure that Singaporeans are given the best support possible for them to embrace the future.
So clearly we're at a very important juncture of Singapore's next phase of economic development. Our political stability, our excellent infrastructure, our quality workforce have attracted companies to invest in Singapore and in turn created better jobs, good jobs for Singaporeans. But the employment landscape has transformed. The nature of jobs will constantly evolve and new skills will be required to be able to respond to global demands. And it is increasingly necessary for all of us to deepen our skills. I thank you all for being here with us tonight. Thank you, Minister. And I thank you for joining us for the last 3 episodes of Skills Future.